Which drugs do you think are true miracle drugs that have saved lives?
The I think that if I was going to pick the top 10 list, but the top of my list, I think it's one of the most important drug discoveries ever, is penicillin. Uh, it Before penicillin, and forget for a second what we know today about antibiotic resistance, if you can. Block from your mind the overuse of antibiotics, which I talk about in everything from, on the growth of vegetables to animal stock to across the field. When it's first developed, discovered in the late 20s, then an Oxford team puts it together, and finally the US government has this crash program on it during World War II. It saves a lot of lives. People beforehand who got an infection, you cut yourself with you're out pruning a rose. This is literally how it was tested. You cut yourself with a thorn, and unfortunately you're unlucky and it becomes infected and then becomes blood poisoning. You could die from it. Penicillin stopped those easy types of things. It stopped the ravaging of gonorrhea and syphilis and sexual disease. It led to all types of mental disease and a host of other illnesses. It stopped people dying on the battlefield during World War II who got a wound that would have killed them beforehand because that would have been infectious. So in terms of how it changed the narrative for the drug industry, it made the modern drug industry in many ways. And it became the most important single drug as what I call a change for us as patients. And then there are a lot of problems with it. Insulin, also a very important drug, changed the life for diabetes patients who in other cases would have often had amputations and the loss of limbs. Some targeted cancer treatments in the last 20 years have helped people with some rare genetic forms of cancer, but the field has been slow in coming to deal with that. But there are some important drug discoveries, none more so than penicillin if you take a snapshot in World War II.
Is the medical industry trying to eliminate alternatives to their drugs, such as chiropractors, herbalists, naturopaths, homeopathics, herbalism, nutrition, and other natural approaches?
No question about that. I mean, you think that drug industry doesn't just compete with itself. Of course, Pfizer's competing with Johnson and Johnson, they're competing with Merck. I get that. But they're also competing with what they would view as alternative treatments, complementary treatments. At 1900 in this country, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, there was a real choice between allopathic medicine, going the route of what the AMA would eventually become, and naturopaths and homeopathic medications. That was crushed. The AMA became a good lobbying force to make sure that doctors got licensed and doctors became the only ones to go to. And then they got a monopoly eventually. Remember, no prescriptions are required. For a long time, you didn't need a prescription to buy controlled substances. They weren't controlled. But in 1938, they required the first prescriptions. They don't really require prescriptions across the board until the late 50s. And then it's in league with the doctors. So the doctors have the AMA. They've got the lock on what you should get as traditional medical treatment. Now they're pushing aside all the naturopaths, chiropractors, everything else out. And then now you have the drug industry saying, okay, now you get you need a prescription to get a drug that might save your life. And who can prescribe it? Only doctors. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think that's why you'll see in the medical literature and in the drug literature, they will criticize, talk about the lack of effectiveness of acupuncture, of different therapies, of touch therapies, and that's because they'll say, "Oh, it doesn't have the gold standard. It hasn't had a clinical trial in which it's a blind placebo test." But I will tell you that what they do, and this is time and time again, by closing the door to those and putting the emphasis just on pharmaceuticals, they have made a country, in our case in America, too dependent on pharmaceutical drugs, too dependent on reaching for a bottle right away, and critically, too much in a rush for a fast solution. And what I mean by that is, acupuncture, for instance, which I've had acupuncture before, can be quite useful. My wife's had acupuncture, but you don't go to an acupuncturist once for an hour and you walk out and say, "Oh, I'm healed. My shoulder is better. I'm completely balanced. My sugar levels are better." It takes time. It's a series of things. The same with a chiropractor. And so what the pharmaceutical industry has said to us, "Oh, that's too much work. Don't worry about that. It's unproven. And even if it worked, by the way, why do you want to spend all those weeks or months doing that? We have a solution. One pill. You pop one pill a day and you're healed. Now, of course, that's a lie. We know that. You pop one pill a day, you may be worse off in some instances. But that's the promise of what they've done. And in a day and age in which people want fast solutions, they've made an easy solution. So my wife wrote years ago a book called This Is Not Your Mother's Menopause. It was about her natural passage through menopause, how she didn't take HRT. She has a history of breast cancer in the family. So she put together a package that worked for herself with black cohosh to treat hot flashes and a whole series of things that worked naturally. It may not work for everybody, but it's a lot of work. She has to exercise. She had to do things. A lot of people would look at that and say, no, I'd rather take HRT. Give me the hormone replacement therapy. So if you're lazy, Big Pharma might be great for you. But if you want to do a little bit of work, there are alternatives that can work.
Is pharma getting better results than 25 years ago due to all the new technology we have?
Pharma has certainly made advances in terms of biotechnology. You hear about these small biotech firms and what they are able to do. So if depends on how you define progress, but I mean, the drug industry would certainly define progress as the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines out. People, I know a lot of people are nervous about the vaccines. A lot of people don't like the fact that they are a synthetic vaccine, a messenger RNA, but it used to be a vaccine was either a live vaccine, had a little bit of the actual underlying illness you were trying to treat, and that happened with polio. It was a Sabin's vaccine, which was given to millions of kids. I was a kid at the time in the 60s. The little sugar cube had a little bit of the live polio vaccine. And as a result, some children, a small number, developed polio from it. They knew when they were giving the vaccine that would happen. It's impossible to give a live vaccine and not have a small number of people actually develop the disease who may be susceptible to it. So that happened. So therefore, for the most part, they went to dead viruses, so-called inert ones that wouldn't be. And that's what the flu vaccine is. You get the vaccine or the influenza shot once a year. It doesn't have a live virus. It's not supposed to make you sick since the virus is dead. Now you get to the new, what I call the modern age, 2020, 2021. You have vaccines that go into your body, delivered in a little capsule that essentially tell your body genetically to wake up and develop a defense for something it's never seen before, this T cell that's going to come in from the COVID virus, and be prepared for it. People worry about, is it targeted enough that it's only turning on that defense to the T cell, or can have a chain reaction for other changes in your body? We may find that out in years to come, but that's the technology that has allowed pharma to develop new vaccines, targeted delivery for some genetic forms of diseases and cancer. I think we will see in the future, far down the road, that scientists may be able to say that certain people with this genetic 23andMe, we go to 23andMe to find out about our genetic heritage, and it says you're prone to this disease or that disease. Mm-hmm. Some women can find out if they're more prone to breast cancer if they have a BRCA gene or other genes. If you're prone to those diseases, they may have treatments that are specifically helpful to those people with a genetic predisposition. That's going to be very specialized medicine, and in the beginning will be very expensive medicine. So it won't be available to everyone. It won't be available to the poor. It won't be available to developing nations. But down the road, it could be helpful.